Tonight's news edition. The lower house condemns an arson attack by Jewish extremists on a Palestinian home that left a child killed and family members seriously injured, and clashes erupt in the West Bank over Israeli crimes against Palestinians. Iraqis protest in Basra against power interruptions as the region witnesses scorching temperatures, and the United Nations puts the death toll in July violence in the country at 1,300. And the Prime Minister addresses a national conference on developing the education sector, saying it is one of the most important events he has ever attended, giving the delegates the choice of making or breaking it. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. The lower house of parliament condemned as an ugly crime an arson attack by extremist Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank on a Palestinian home in which an 18-month-old child died and his parents and brother were seriously injured. The House demanded international protection for all Palestinians. In a statement, the deputy said the daily crimes perpetrated by the Israeli government and the settlers against the land and people and holy sites of Palestine contravene all international laws and human rights. The statement urged the international community to provide protection for the unarmed Palestinian people and demanded that pro-settlement organizations be labeled as terrorist groups worthy of condemnation. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, Palestinians clashed with Israeli troops near the city of Ramallah after the funeral of a Palestinian youth who was shot by Israeli security during confrontations in the Gaza Strip yesterday. Violent protests took place in several parts of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and Jerusalem yesterday following the funeral of a Palestinian toddler who was burnt to death when his home was torched by Jewish terrorists. According to the Israeli military, Israeli soldiers fired at the Palestinian youth after he threw a firebomb at them. Over to Syria, where at least 25 rebels were killed in a failed attack on a makeshift army base outside the northern city of Aleppo. 9 Syrian army soldiers were also killed in fighting that erupted after several rebel groups launched the attack late yesterday. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said 3 senior rebel commanders were among 25 fighters killed. The official Sana news agency reported that a number of terrorists were killed and wounded by government forces in the western part of the city. Elsewhere, the observatory said Daesh terrorists issued warnings to local internet providers to halt private Wi-Fi supply in the town of Abu Kamal in eastern Deir ez-Zor province. The observatory said the bans appeared to be motivated by Daesh's desire to create a news blackout, but also to thwart foreign fighters who might be trying to return home without their permission. Hundreds of residents of Iraq's southern city of Basra demonstrated over frequent electricity cuts and poor quality of water, demanding better services from the government. More than 600 people waved banners as they protested in front of the governor's office to demand a solution to the long-running problems of extended power cuts and salty tap water. Protesters blamed the lack of services on government corruption and waved banners critical of political blocs. This report has more.
Not even the searing heat kept protesters from coming out. Residents in Iraq's southeastern city of Basra say they're tired of chronic government-imposed power cuts and salty tap water. And a heat wave pushing temperatures to 122 degrees Fahrenheit or past 50 degrees Celsius is just making things worse, they say. Protesters blame the lack of services on government corruption, waving banners critical of political blocs.
Our demands are very simple. First of all, to be fair with Basra in the distribution of electricity and water. All people from Basra are buying water. Be fair towards Basra with jobs. All young people in Basra are left without jobs, but people from other provinces come here to work.
The U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 badly damaged the country's infrastructure, including its national power grid. Most homes and businesses only receive a few hours of power a day, which increases the price of doing business and leaves many depending on private generators. Hundreds also demonstrated on Friday in the capital Baghdad for the same reasons, suggesting that as temperatures rise, so too do tempers in the crippling heat.
Meanwhile, and amid the war on Daesh, the United Nations said over 1,300 Iraqis were killed by violence in July. The UN mission to Iraq said at least 844 civilians were among the dead, while 488 members of Iraqi security forces and pro-government militias fighting Daesh were also killed. It put the number of the wounded at over 2,000, and Baghdad was the worst affected province, with 335 people killed. Yemen's Vice President and Prime Minister of the internationally recognized government, Khal returned to the southern port city of Aden from his exile in Saudi Arabia. In a statement after his arrival, he said his visit to Aden should not come as a surprise and the city needs facilities to engage in politics. Several cabinet members also arrived in Yemen. Bahah had fled into exile with President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi and the rest of his government when the rebels entered Aden, their last refuge, earlier this year. The president of Iraq's Kurdistan region condemned Turkey's bombardment of Zarkala village, which he said left a number of civilians dead, and called for all sides to return to the peace process. Turkey has repeatedly attacked Kurdistan Workers' Party PKK camps in northern Iraq in the past week, in what it said is a response to a series of targeted killings of police officers and soldiers blamed on the Kurdish militant group. Locals said 8 people were killed, including 4 belonging to the same family, and 4 more were wounded. On a visit to Washington, Kurdistan's head of foreign relations, Falah Mustafa, criticized the PKK for abandoning its ceasefire, but said bombarding them was not the answer and would only escalate the situation. He urged both sides to go back to the ceasefire, saying the best way forward would be peace talks. A piece of debris that experts believe could be from missing flight MH370 has arrived in France from the Indian Ocean island of Réunion, where it was found last week. The object, believed to be part of a wing, is now at a Defense Ministry laboratory in Toulouse for analysis. The Malaysian Transport Minister said the additional Malaysian officials headed to Réunion to look for more debris, and others would go to France. The Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777 travelling from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing vanished in March 2014. Since then, an Australian-led search effort has been focused on a vast area of the southern Indian Ocean. There were more than 200 passengers and crew on board. Back here at home, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour called for a comprehensive plan to upgrade national education to guarantee a better future for the new generation. Mansour was speaking at the opening of the Educational Development Conference organised by the Ministry of Education with the participation of parliamentarians, university presidents, educationists, experts and civil society. He cautioned the delegates at what he described as a highly important event that they either come up with superficial remedies or present a profound vision for the future of education, and they either update the educational process or sustain a narrow-minded status quo. The Prime Minister noted, and I quote, "This is the choice of a nation and not a conference." The meeting aims to discuss ways to develop school and university curricula upgrade infrastructure to facilitate the learning process, restructure vocational education and training to better meet market needs, as well as to integrate information technology in education to fulfill development needs. Jordan has the highest literacy rate in the Arab and Muslim worlds, the highest number of university graduates, and the largest number of teachers working abroad, as for decades the kingdom's focus has been on quantity rather than quality. Over to the migrant crisis, and Britain's Labour's interim leader has written to Prime Minister David Cameron asking that France pay compensation to British holidaymakers and haulage companies for the disruption caused by the migrant crisis and wildcat strikes. Yesterday, Cameron warned that Calais crisis is likely to last throughout the summer, as he announced additional security measures to protect the Eurotunnel railhead in France. Today, Britons protested, some expressing compassion to the migrants, while others opposing migrant policies. Here's more.
The rallies so far are small, but the underlying crisis is growing. Migrants are now massing in the thousands in Calais, France, in hopes of sneaking through the Channel Tunnel and seeking asylum in the UK. One group in Folkestone, England, calling itself Folkestone United, came out to say Britain needs to do more to help the migrants.
Britain doesn't play its full part in taking the amount of asylum seekers and refugees that there are. So I think the response to the people who are trying to get through is dreadful.
As French ferry workers continue striking in Calais, migrants are exploiting the chaos to sneak into the Channel Tunnel. At least 9 migrants have been killed in the process this year. Across the street from the pro-migrant demonstrations in Folkestone, rival groups staged a counter-protest, but everything remained peaceful. Paul Golding is the leader of Britain First, an anti-immigration, anti-jihad organization.
We're here today to oppose these left-wing traitors across the road who want open borders, mass immigration, and they believe that everyone who's coming here should just be allowed in. We're a small, overcrowded island with barely enough space and resources for our own people. Migrants have long gathered in Calais to try to get into Britain. Eurotunnel, the firm that runs freight and passenger shuttles via the Channel Tunnel, says their numbers have swelled tenfold this year, and migrants have become better organized in their attempts to transit the tunnel.
In Germany, a group of migrants from West Africa, Iran and Afghanistan have found a dramatic way to tell about their odysseys as asylum seekers throughout a theatrical interpretation of Joseph Conrad's novel, Heart of Darkness. At an art center in Berlin, the migrants adapted the tale of an explorer venture into the dark jungle of the Congo. The migrants' work was directed by a Polish director who chose Conrad's controversial novel to give a voice to those who have fled their countries in search for a better life. While Heart of Darkness describes a trip to the heart of Africa, in which the main character is witness to the harsh colonial administration of the Belgians, the migrant theatre turns the story around, allowing migrants to tell their story to the heart of Europe.
People who have fled their own countries or want to come to Europe for other reasons often find themselves in very dark moments. And these difficult times do not come to an end when they arrive in Berlin, because here they have to struggle with the labyrinth of bureaucracy. Often they do not speak German at all, nor do they understand the mechanisms of power here.
More than 300,000 people have sought asylum in Germany only this year. Now, let's take you to Ecuador, where according to the World Guinness Record website, the country achieved a new record, planting 237 plant species in 8 hours in multiple locations. The record was achieved by the South American country's Ministerio de Ambiente at multiple venues across the country on May the 16th, 2015. During the record attempt, the Ecuadorian government counted the participation of over 57,000 people, which reforested an area of 2,000 hectares and planted 765,000 plants. The initiative was sponsored by the Ministry of Environment, which invited all Ecuadorian citizens to participate and to afforest different ecosystems throughout the country.
Por esas equivocaciones históricas que ha tenido el país, se sembró eucalipto.
Germany beat Russia to win the European Volleyball Confederation Beach Volleyball Championship, which was held in Austria. Laura Ludwig and Kira Valkenhorst cruised past Ekaterina Berlova and Evgenia Ikolova with 2 straight sets. The German pair won 7 consecutive matches in Klagenfurt and lost only 1 set. In the second set, the Russians twice drew level but could not pass the Germans. Kinga Kolosinska and Monika Berzostek of Poland came in 3rd place, giving their country its first ever medal at a European championship. Finnish driver Jari-Matti Latvala built up an impressive margin of 11.4 seconds over world champion Sebastian Ogier during a hard day's driving in Rally, Finland. Latvala overtook fellow Volkswagen driver Ogier for the lead late on Friday afternoon, but improved on the advantage today, despite the Frenchman almost matching him for stage wins, 3 for Ogier and 4 for Latvala, with 1 left to run. Behind the 2 came Chris Meek of Northern Ireland in his Citroën until he crashed out on stage 16, giving the 3rd place to Mads Ostberg of Norway in the other Citroën. The rally concludes tomorrow with just 2 stages. Finally, a look at the weather forecast. Moderate for the rest of tonight across the hilly areas and relatively hot in the Jordan Valley and the port city of Aqaba. The Dead Sea should expect a low of 33 degrees tonight, the highest low so far in the summer season. Tomorrow, hot and dry weather will prevail across much of the country, as a further rise in temperatures will push temperatures to 7 or 8 degrees above seasonal average countrywide. There will be a slight chance for light rain, especially in the country's south and east, while winds will be northwesterly or easterly, changing to northwesterly brisk. High temperatures will, for the first time, touch and slightly cross the 45-degree mark across the southernmost parts of the Jordan Valley and the Gulf of Aqaba. The weatherman warns against direct exposure to sunlight during the hot spell, especially at midday, and urges farmers to irrigate their crops later tonight. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To close our top stories once again. The Lower House condemns an arson attack by Jewish extremists on a Palestinian home that left a child killed and family members seriously injured, and clashes erupt in the West Bank over Israeli crimes against Palestinians. Iraqis protest in Basra against power interruptions as the region witnesses scorching temperatures, and the United Nations puts the death toll in July violence in the country at 1,300. And the Prime Minister addresses a national conference on developing the education sector, saying it is one of the most important events he has ever attended, giving the delegates the choice of making or breaking it. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. My name is Rad Lupouche. Thank you so much for your company.